Brandon's problem all the time where I actually start doing it.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this meeting. We're going to give it a couple of minutes just to let everyone trickle into the room, but we'll be starting this session very soon.
Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can hold back the dawn. Let's keep it burning, let's keep the flame of hope alive, make safe our journey through the storm. And as we're striking, we will be standing side by side, our generation on the rise. Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can hold back the dawn. Let's keep it burning, let's keep the flame of hope alive, make safe our journey through the storm. And as we're striking, we will be standing side by side, our generation on the rise. Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can hold back the dawn. Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can hold back the dawn. Let's keep it burning, let's keep the flame of hope alive, make safe our journey through the storm. And as we're striking, we will be standing side by side, our generation on the rise. Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this call. We wanted to give a couple minutes to give folks a second to trickle in. And we will be beginning our session now. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our mobilization call. My name is Adriana, and I use she, her pronouns, and I work for Lead Now as a campaigner. I'll be your moderator for today. Before we start the meeting, I wanted to acknowledge that I'm joining you all today from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh people, colonially known as Vancouver, BC. We recognize that people are joining from all over today. So wherever you are, I invite you to take a moment to acknowledge the territory you're on. I want to encourage us all to think about our relationship to the land and the responsibility we have to the Indigenous people who have been stewards of this land for so many generations. This responsibility also includes taking action to support them and standing in solidarity with them. If you're not sure whose territory you live on, you can go to native-land.ca, and someone will put the link in the chat, and input where you live, and it'll give you information about whose land you live on, and also the treaties that might exist there depending on where you live. This tool is meant to be a starting point, and we encourage folks to do a lot more research on ways that you can support Indigenous communities where you live. We encourage people to learn about host nations and how you can support them. And next up, I'll be doing some more information and some housekeeping. So for our call today, just want to give a brief run through of Zoom. I know a lot of folks have been on Zoom a lot recently over the last 2 years, but we will have closed captioning available, and you can turn them on by clicking the CC button at the bottom right of Zoom. So you'll be able to enable closed captions that way. If you want to enable French translation, we will have a live translator to support that as well. To enable this function, you just click on the interpretation button, also at the bottom right of the Zoom screen. It's a globe symbol, so if you click that, At the bottom, you'll be able to select the French language and be able to actually listen to this entire call in French. We will also be live streaming on Facebook as well, and you'll be able to view the meeting recording after we're done and rewatch it there. During this call, we'll also have a brief Q&A later on. You'll be able to submit your questions live throughout the call by emailing us at organize@leadnow.ca. We won't be able to answer everyone's questions, unfortunately, but we will try our best to accommodate and answer the most commonly asked questions. So if you have questions, send them throughout the session by emailing us at organize@leadnow.ca. Next slide, please. Next up, I wanted to briefly chat about the agenda. So for today, we'll start by introducing our incredible speakers, and we'll hear directly from them on what's happening on the front lines. They'll set some context about the CGL pipeline and the courageous Wet'suwet'en resistance to defend their land from resource extraction for the sake of corporate profit. After their presentation, we'll have some important calls to action on how you can support Wet'suwet'en land defenders. Make sure you stick around for this part. We'll also share a toolkit and take some digital actions together. So for today's session, we'll equip you with the tools, the knowledge, and all the support you need to take action to support Wet'suwet'en land defenders. And after we wrap all of this up, then we'll have a brief Q&A. And again, please send us questions directly to that email that we mentioned, and we'll have about 10 minutes at the end to be able to have the Q&A session. Next slide, thank you. So next up, I'm really excited to introduce our amazing speakers for today. We're joined by 3 Wet'suwet'en land defenders for our call. First, we'll hear from Sleydo, also known as Molly Wickham. Sleydo is a spokesperson for Gidimt'en Checkpoint on Wet'suwet'en territory. She is a fierce land defender and advocate for Wet'suwet'en rights, and will kick us off by filling us in on what's been happening at the front lines and add some historical context on the fight to stop Coastal GasLink. We are also joined by Chief Namox and Chief Was, who are 2 of the hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en Nation from Tsayu and Gidimt'en clans. They'll share more about the history of violence from the RCMP and how the CGL pipeline is damaging for the environment. And without further ado, I'll pass it to Sleydo.
Hari, Denise, Tsakaise, Skyse. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here today and taking time to listen to myself, Denise Namox, and Denise Was. For a decade, Wet'suwet'en land defenders have been resisting the construction of the Coastal GasLink fracked gas pipeline on our territory. Coastal GasLink has never received the free, prior, and informed consent from Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs to proceed. Even the colonial Supreme Court of Canada has recognized that Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs never ceded their title. The hereditary chiefs, who are the leaders of the nation's governance system in place before the imposition of the Indian Act, have full jurisdiction over 22,000 square kilometers of the nation's traditional territory, an area recognized as unceded by the Supreme Court of Canada in the 1997 Delgamuukw-Gisdewe decision. In fact, most of the land in BC has never been ceded or surrendered. Since 2009, we've reoccupied old village sites and set up checkpoints to monitor the illegal activities of Coastal GasLink attempting to build this pipeline across our territory and to uphold Wet'suwet'en law. In January of 2020, the hereditary chiefs of all 5 clans of the Wet'suwet'en issued an eviction notice to Coastal GasLink, citing their trespass of Wet'suwet'en laws. Also in 2020, the UN issued a letter urging Canada to stop construction and remove RCMP from our territory because Coastal GasLink did not have the free, prior, and informed consent of the Wet'suwet'en people to proceed. Not long after, in March 2020, thousands of people shut down Canada in one of the most epic and memorable moments in our history. From coast to coast, you blocked intersections, railways, ports, and camped out at MP offices to demand they respect Wet'suwet'en jurisdiction and stop Coastal GasLink. And you made global headlines, forcing Justin Trudeau and John Horgan to commit to entering title discussions with the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs, as set out by the landmark Delgamuukw case. Thanks to Indigenous allies, grassroots organizers, and everyday citizens, the colonial governments were forced to make a move. Remember the mass mobilizing after the 2019 raids and how the uprising grew into a full-on shutdown of so-called Canada. All because you believed in us, believed in your own power, and were outraged at the treatment of Indigenous people and the environment playing out on the ground in Wet'suwet'en territory. The governments were scared because the people were rising up and they could no longer ignore long-standing land issues. Then COVID hit and the whole world shut down, but CGL continued work and so did the Wet'suwet'en. In November of last year, police violence on land defenders escalated once again after a 56-day occupation of the drill pad site called Coyote Camp. Recently released information revealed that these raids were being planned while the province was leading the chiefs to believe they were going to meet at a summit to discuss the ongoing conflict. John Horgan has repeatedly allowed the use of police force on Indigenous people amidst a flooding crisis across BC. Yet after 32 arrests over a 2-day militarized raid, the drill pad site was reoccupied again only weeks later. This is the type of determination people from coast to coast have resiliently expressed over the last decade of this struggle to protect Wedzin Kwa, our right to exist as Wet'suwet'en and the Yinta for our future generations. Recently, RCMP and SERG intimidation, harassment, and violence has escalated on our land yet again. We've been sharing daily footage of incidents on our new accounts documenting the daily RCMP and SERG harassment. For the past month, the SERG, RCMP, and even local police have been terrorizing Gidimt'en village site with where our elders live between 5 and 8 times per day and night. They threaten our elders with arrest. They've been engaging in theft of our property, vandalism of our property, stalking, trespassing, breaking and entering, all with the justification that this is Crown land. Our people have the right to build homes and live on our territories free from harassment, intimidation, and violence. RCMP and SERG are purposefully using psychological warfare to try to drive us off our lands. This is not new. Nothing has changed in 150 years in so-called Canada, and nothing has changed for us since time immemorial. We will never leave these territories, and we will continue to assert our rights to uphold our laws on our lands. Here's a quick video we'll show you of RCMP footage from just a few days ago.
Since 2019, this location has been used as a base of operations for individuals committing criminal code offenses and actions breaching a Supreme Court injunction.
Who are those guys beneath?
Many of those individuals have been arrested and released by the court on conviction.
Who are those guys?
Bad guys?
Those are the bad guys. They're here to invade your territory. They decided you're not allowed to live here. Their boss is instructing them to come here and harass you, so your generation can't live here. They're in a long line of cops that pushed Indigenous people off their land. This is their job. That's what their badge means. That's what they signed up for. 10,000 kids are murdered at residential school. Not one of them investigate. They're here to harass you. You.
Sleydo, I believe the next slide is on now.
Sorry. It's kind of hard to watch. Right now, Coastal GasLink is expected to start drilling under the sacred headwaters of the Wedzin Kwa on unceded Wet'suwet'en land in less than a month, It's why we've gathered you here today to help sound the alarm to kill the drill. Working to stop the Coastal GasLink project from destroying our lands and waters has been going on for years and has meant a great deal of sacrifice, victories, losses, and support. We can never lose sight of why we are doing this for the future generations. This is our fight, and the people on the ground are sacrificing to be here each and every day because everyone will benefit from our successes. Government and industry know that if we win this, it'll change the way that they do business forever. Our children, all children, need to be connected to the water, the earth, and the animals. They need to intimately know where their ancestors walked, and we intend to fiercely protect that for them. We are Yankadani, people of the earth. We have been here upholding our laws forever and will continue to do so forever. And now I'll pass it on to Denise Was. Awitsa.
Ari so senle. Steve cha gane balani stadi cha ni kana so cha de des. Nize cha kaze skaize so Steve cha ta. Mono clan. Nasudi zata kani skoni willow seleka. Awai seleka. No ne del was. La no ne no next et de sel. Sunye ba et. Hotena di aten ni a yatla. Hotena patlets on. Sunye so it would etsi. How asli is no asha. Eta patlets on. Stih chal. Allah ti no penazisi. Ay ka nasudi zalta. Di ka ne dehtel. Ta din dehtel. Allah disni. The governments of Canada and BC evaded bad press and condemnation from the international community by agreeing to begin negotiations to recognize Wet'suwet'en title in March 2020. It was celebrated even within the community, my community, because we thought they meant what they said. It was a smart move on their part because the attention moved on. But they haven't made any progress with us on those title discussions. Haven't stopped construction and haven't pulled the RCMP or CIRG off our territories. In fact, things have gotten worse. While we were trying to live out our daily lives and conduct cultural activities or practices with our elders and children, police came in every day with at least 6 officers, intimidating us, surveilling us, illegally arresting and detaining people on their own lands. The UN has issued yet another letter to those governments of Canada and BC, calling for withdrawal of the police forces, stop the forced eviction of the Wet'suwet'en people, and to halt construction. The UN once again urged Canada to cease construction of the Coastal GasLink pipeline until free and prior informed consent is received from the Wet'suwet'en people and engage in negotiations with these impacted communities. Canada is founded on a history of violence on and oppression of the Indigenous people. At the arrival of the settlers from Europe to North America, there were more than 100 Indigenous people across the Americas. By the end of the 19th century, 90 to 99% of these population was gone. We were killed by disease, guns, and blades. Land theft and forced eviction occurred on massive scales. It's happening to this day on my people's territory. We were encouraged to give up our land, to make settlements and sign treaties, or face more bloodshed yet we were able to survive without ever ceding or surrendering our lands. Agreements under duress are not agreements at all. They are coercions. Canada is the only G7 country to have received 3 letters from the United Nations reprimanding it from its continued and escalating violence on Indigenous peoples. The use of force, intimidation, harassment under the guise of the law to remove Indigenous peoples from their land is an old tale. That is how the government of Canada came into being. They came and forced Indigenous peoples off the land, ravaged our land for their profit, and is happening still to this day. For all their talk of reconciliation, of respecting Indigenous peoples, and for recognizing our right to self-determination, they have not shown us they mean it. A recent inspection of coastal GasLink construction showed continued erosion and sedimentation despite 2 recent fines. Our environmental assessment coordinator from the office of Wet'suwet'en went with an inspector from the BC Government Environmental Assessment Office and observed many violations, including erosion, sedimentation, and oil spill. It's exactly what hereditary chiefs knew was going to happen and why we were and are against the project. If we don't stop the drilling, we risk losing our water, land, and the way of life, our way of life. The liberation of my people and the realization of our self-determination is a path towards healing the planet. It's why we've called you here today, to ask you to stand with us, to speak up, so we can hold accountable the people responsible. So it is quite disturbing and at the same time realistic. We have done as much as we can to make and protect the waters and the wildlife and our way of life. It is not for us, just for our children, but for the children that are living in Telkwa, Smithers, Houston, the non-Wet'suwet'en people. Their children are at risk as well. We care for them as well. I would say. Nemo.
Denny's 8U, Tsaka's 8U, Sky's 8. I am Chief Namox. I currently sit as the highest ranking chief of the Tsayu, one of the 5 clans of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. I say currently because if we don't stand up for our land, air, water, culture, and protect those who live on our lands, our nation has a right to take our name. If we go against our laws of protection, our nation has a right to take our name. Currently, we are in crisis and we're asking for your help to stop the drilling that will force us off our land and destroy our water. But this fight impacts more than just the Wet'suwet'en communities and nation. Coastal GasLink, if constructed, would be a 670-kilometer long pipeline that would carry fracked gas from Northeast British Columbia to LNG Canada, a liquefied natural gas terminal under construction on the west coast of Canada. LNG Canada is the largest LNG terminal ever proposed in Canada. A recent report said the carbon impact of fracked gas could be worse than coal, and yet fossil fuel executives and companies are selling fracked gas as a cleaner alternative, a transitional fuel. The pipeline would have the capacity to transport up to 2.1 billion cubic feet of frack gas every day. If built, this liquefied natural gas creates methane emission byproducts and has more than 80 times the warming potential of carbon dioxide. All this at a time when the latest climate scientists say it's now or never for ambitious action on climate change. All this at a time when even the United Nations Secretary General says that countries increasing their fossil fuel extraction are truly dangerous radicals. Not myself, not Sleydo, not WAS, nor our cousins and allies that peacefully are defending our lands while guns are pointed at our heads. The dangerous radicals are the people allowing more fossil fuel extraction as our world races towards worsening impacts and pushes the boundaries of a livable planet. Canada is the only G7 country whose emissions have increased since the Paris Agreement was signed. Colonial economies have depended on the extraction of natural resources and the oppression of people of color as early as the 16th century. This process took many forms: mining for gold and silver in the global south, the creation of plantations, the creation of reserves, and the apartheid system. Nothing has changed today. The legacy of genocide and ecological destruction continues to live and thrive in the present-day global economy, thanks to the greed of extractive industries and the state power that protects them from community resistance. Coastal GasLink is not any benefit to any of our communities, nor our nation, nor the planet. It's for the benefit of companies and their funders' bottom line. It's time we make these connections clear to the public and hold our oppressors accountable. Reconciliation will not happen staring down the barrel of a gun. I want to leave you with 3 pieces of advice, if I could, and urge you to remind yourself of this every day. It's never wrong to do the right thing. It's never too late to act now. You have to remember that money has no conscience. You do. Who you deal with, how you do your banking, and what they do with it. That is your money, that is your conscience. Follow your heart, follow your soul, do the right thing. And with that, I thank you. Masai Kyo.
So let's talk about who we need to hold accountable for the colonial violence and oppression of Wet'suwet'en people. OJ Pipelines, owned by Quanta Services, is one of Canada's largest pipeline contractors and recently took over building the part of the pipeline through Gidimt'en territory. This is the 3rd switch in prime contractors through Gidimt'en territory since construction began in 2019. And each time there's a new contractor, construction is delayed. Neither of these companies are used to being at the center of attention and could be sensitive to a flood of public pressure calling them out for building an illegal pipeline on our land that has never received consent from the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs. These construction contractors are the ones who are doing the actual drilling, and we need them to stop. We need to tie the colonial oppression of our people to their work. Their employees and investors need to know the destruction they're causing and the violation of Indigenous rights that they are committing. Secondly, the so-called governments of Canada and British Columbia are not only breaking their promises to enter into discussions to recognize Wet'suwet'en title, they're using state-sanctioned force, harassment, and surveillance of my people and community to force this pipeline across our land. They've been called out by the UN, but very few people in the public know this. These government officials and leaders get their power from the people who voted them in. We need to make sure those people from coast to coast know exactly what type of leaders they're voting for, that their governments, the people that they elected, are not only turning a blind eye to the oppression of Indigenous peoples for resource extraction, but they're actively supporting it. Finally, the financial institutions that bankroll Coastal GasLink are culpable. The big banks in Canada are financially tied to Coastal GasLink, with RBC being the worst. Banks and institutions around the world are funding this frack gas pipeline that is trespassing on our land. We need to hold them accountable by revealing that they are funding colonial oppression and climate destruction. The risk to their brand and reputation could force them to divest or cut their funding.
Thank you so much for that, Chief Namox, Chief Loss, and also Sleydo. It was really hard to listen to the stories of hundreds of years of violence and the oppression that you folks are facing through the RCMP, and just very grateful for the work that you do, and also for sharing those stories with us. I know they're hard to share, and just very grateful for you sharing the space with us today. And now that we've heard from Wet'suwet'en leaders, allies, now after the UN has issued another urgent letter, and before drilling threatens Wet'suwet'en water and land, it's time for us to sound the alarm. If dozens and then hundreds and maybe even thousands of people speak up and act, we could build enough momentum to turn the spotlight back on the fight to stop Coastal GasLink. And first, to turn the spotlight on the contractors, you can help flood the airwaves and expose OJ Pipelines and Quanta Services' complicity in trespassing and violating Wet'suwet'en rights. If we can flood LinkedIn and Twitter in front of OJ Pipelines and Quanta Services shareholders, investors, customers, and then call them out for engaging in colonial oppression of Indigenous people, then we can show them that their reputation and public image are at stake. And maybe we'll have a chance at pushing them to cancel their contract. Their AGM is May 27th. That's tomorrow. And we want to make sure that they feel the pressure and back out of this disastrous project. As we know, corporations like to flaunt their work on their AGM and bolster their achievements. It's where they'll be talking about their profit margin and their exceptional services. But if we shine a spotlight on their involvement with the corporate colonial oppression of Indigenous people in front of their top advisors and investors, it could hit them where it really hurts. So that being said, let's all take some action right now so we can let those people know that we're not going to let them get away with it. Our goal is to rain on their parade by highlighting their complicity in a project that tramples on Indigenous rights and destroys the planet. So it's really simple. Right now, together, we can all click on the link in the chat. It'll pop up in a second, with pre-populated tweets targeting Quanta Services ahead of their AGM tomorrow. We can make sure investors and shareholders are alerted to the fact that they're complicit in violating Indigenous rights and building an illegal pipeline. When you click the link, you'll see a tweet pop up. Don't worry, when you hit send on the tweet, your tweet will include a video of the RCMP violence that Wet'suwet'en people are facing, and it will also tag Quanta to make sure that they can see it. And if you don't have Twitter, don't worry, we've got other actions lined up for you. I'm going to put another link in the chat. This one will pop up as a post on LinkedIn. You can share this on your LinkedIn by clicking the share icon at the bottom of the post, or you can post it on Facebook and Instagram. And we'll put those links in the chat now as well. And we're going to give folks about 30 seconds to take some of these actions once the links are in the chat, to give folks a moment to actually to do it live, to do it together as a collective, hoping to get hundreds, if not thousands of people to retweet and to share this. We really need to get it out into the airwaves and call Quanta Services out for their complicity ahead of their AGM, which is tomorrow. And we're going to give it about 30 seconds, but just for folks to imagine decision makers at Quanta at their AGM tomorrow trying to highlight all of their achievement and their profit margins, and they get bombarded with tweets calling them out for constructing CGL. They do not want that kind of negative attention, so let's make sure that we rain on their parade for tomorrow. So share this link, share it on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. They're pre-populated, so it's super easy for you to go for it.
When light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can hold back the dawn. Let's keep it burning, let's keep the flame of hope alive, to make safe our journey through the storm. And as we're striking, we will be standing side by side, our generation on the rise. Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can.
Thank you so much for everyone who took these actions with us. Don't worry if you weren't able to do them all at once. We're sending a toolkit out afterwards with all this information. Another way that you can support is by helping to bring these stories of impacted communities at the front lines to the forefront of public attention. And you can do this by sharing and amplifying the voices of land defenders. They've been holding it down at the front lines and facing daily harassment and intimidation by the RCMP and by the Community Industry Response Group, also known as CIRG. So follow these social media accounts on the slide and make sure you help reshare and retweet their posts as often as you can. The more we can amplify the stories from the front lines, the better our chance of exposing the violence and holding the RCMP accountable. Again, don't worry if you aren't able to get all of this right now, it'll all be in the toolkit. Finally, I think another point that's really important to mention is the importance of nonviolent direct action. Some of the most powerful things you can do to shine a spotlight on the illegal Coastal GasLink pipeline. In the words of Martin Luther King Jr., the goal of nonviolent direct action is to create a crisis, such a crisis and foster such attention as to demand a response. Wet'suwet'en people are in crisis right now, but the crisis is far from the public eye and far from the media. If we can get hundreds of people, grassroots groups, and indigenous nations from coast to coast across the country out on the streets, then key decision makers at the government level and contractors will have no choice but to stop and listen. Taking direct action is a crucial part of movement building. Having thousands of everyday people join a direct action can be extremely powerful. There are many examples of this in history, but one example that stands out for me personally is the youth climate strikes in 2018 and 2019. I want to share this story because it is a bit personal. I was just wrapping up my degree, and I was deeply involved in youth climate organizing. I was feeling really anxious and worried about my future, and if my generation even had a place in it, to be honest. And the climate strikes gave me a place to channel my frustration and my anxiety into action. Collectively, we were able to put climate change on the radar on a global scale. And I was particularly inspired by other youth, especially in the global South, and fellow BIPOC youth who organized to draw the connections between climate change, racial justice, imperialism, and colonialism. And showing up for the climate strikes was only the beginning. It helped create a movement of people who are involved and determined to build a better future for everyone. But movement building isn't just about showing up to rallies, although that's an important part of it. It's also organizing with your community. It's building relationships with your neighbors. It's pressuring the government. Sometimes it also includes having uncomfortable conversations with your family. It's mutual aid, and it's so much more. It's showing up consistently. And we need to create powerful movements made up of everyday people who are working together to fight intersecting systems of oppression to collectively build a better world for everyone. So let's make sure that we build movements that are centered around justice and indigenous sovereignty so that we're better able to show up and support the brave land defenders who are doing such important work, as we've all just heard in this call. We need to make sure that decision makers cannot ignore our demands and that they are held accountable for endangering all of our futures by approving a pipeline that tramples on indigenous rights. Grassroots movements have been successful in the past, and if we organize and show up now, we can be successful too. So join us to help stop the CGL pipeline and uphold Wet'suwet'en sovereignty. You could take your demands to our so-called government leaders and the funders that are bankrolling this pipeline, whether in person or digital. Some questions to ask yourself. What does your MP have to say about the United Nations' third letter to the government of BC and Canada? This letter is calling them out for constructing Coastal GasLink pipeline and for trying to instigate an investigation on excessive RCMP force and surveillance. What about the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, Mark Miller, whose main job is to progress reconciliation between the Crown and Indigenous people? Minister Mark Miller's mandate is to support self-determination of Indigenous people. What would we have to say about the most highly respected international body calling him out for not doing his job? If enough of us speak up, it could force all of them to answer the United Nations call. Check out the actions that I'll post in the chat to help put pressure on key decision makers to withdraw the police from Wet'suwet'en land now. So let's take another 20 seconds to send decision makers an email about stopping RCMP violence against Wet'suwet'en land defenders. So we'll give it 30 seconds for you to be able to sign on to this and join the collective.
Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can hold back the dawn. Let's keep it burning, let's keep the flame of hope alive, to make safe our journey through the storm. And as we're striking, we will be standing side by side, our generation on the rise. Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can hold back the dawn. Let's keep it burning, let's keep the flame of hope alive.
Thank you to everyone who just took action. Again, this will all be in the toolkit for folks as well. So I'm very glad that we've already have 8,000 people who've directly emailed decision makers, and we hope we'll get more. Another question for folks to ask about, and one of the things that Sleydo was mentioning, was who are the people who are funding this project? RBC is a critical investor and funder of the Coastal GasLink pipeline. Publicly, RBC keeps making grand commitments to respect Indigenous rights, ethical investment, and climate action, but they're not walking the talk. RBC is not only funding the Coastal GasLink pipeline to the tune of $315 million, but they're also the linchpin to a $6.5 billion loan that's backed up by 26 other banks. Even though RBC commitments to Indigenous human rights,
tabs go everywhere you go.
To fund Coastal GasLink's violence against the Wet'suwet'en people. In order for banks that are bankrolling Coastal GasLink to really feel the heat, we can bring people power to bank branches, head offices, and hit them all over social media in front of their peers and investors. Let's take a moment to tell RBC to stop funding Coastal GasLink and fossil fuel projects. And we'll put another quick link in the chat. Just for folks to know, RBC had their AGM in April, and hundreds of people, if not thousands, across the country banded together to call RBC out for their investments. This was a huge media hit, and several mainstream media outlets wrote articles about RBC's terrible investment in fossil fuels and in Coastal GasLink. RBC got lots of bad press on their big day, and we need to continue ramping up the pressure. So I'll give another 10 seconds for folks to sign on to this action, calling out RBC.
Cease to agitate, we will, when the slave whip sound is still. When no more old guiltless limb, fetters cut the circlet grim. When no more hounds thirst for blood, scouring the thorny Georgian woods. When no more mothers pleading prayer, quivers on the southern air. On that day, we will be family equal, born and free. Dawn will come, night will cease.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. And last but not least, when the police started heavily evicting people as illegal construction ramps up, Sleydo and Gidimt'en want you to prepare to come to the Yinta if you're able to. For people who are able to go to the Yinta, it can be extremely impactful. You'd be directly supporting land defenders and bearing witness to the work they do and the oppression they face at the hands of the state. Being able to show up physically on the land would be extremely helpful for land defenders. And now we'd love for you to sign up to get updates directly from Gidimt'en Checkpoint. To get on the Gidimt'en Checkpoint mailing list for regular detailed updates and more information, just click on the link in the chat and fill out the forms on the landing page. And we've got a toolkit that will send you when you sign up for the mailing list with key facts and background information on Coastal GasLink. This information includes key decision makers' names, contact info, and other information on the groups and people responsible for trespassing and violating Indigenous Wet'suwet'en rights. The toolkit will give you some ideas for actions you can take, and you can view and download all of our art and posters, for your actions. So first, click on the link in the chat to sign up to get updates directly from Gidimt'en. So if someone can add that link to the chat, that would be wonderful. I see it there. So I'll give folks another 10 seconds to sign up so that you're able to actually keep updated and follow it up with the actions. All right, so Gidimt'en often share details about updates from camp and the ways that you can support. You can also watch out for emails from them when illegal construction begins to ramp up and when RCMP surveillance is going to increase. So sign up to the mailing list as the best source of updates. And now you can also click the link in the chat for the action toolkit, where you'll have all the information you need to take your first live action. You can download it and print beautiful art and posters through this toolkit too. So for now, thank you everyone. We're going to have a few minutes for a Q&A, and thanks to everyone who sent in a question. So now we're going to go into the Q&A session. So the first question that we have: what can we say to people who undermine our position by claiming that many Wet'suwet'en, not to mention other First Peoples, also support this development? So what can we say to others who are trying to undermine this? And maybe we can start with Sleydo to kick us off with this question.
I think that that's a really easy one because our hereditary system has been our governance system for thousands of years. It predates Canada and nobody else has jurisdiction on the territories. So no other nation can say that this benefits them and that it should go through our territory, just like we wouldn't say that on somebody else's territory. The clan governance system has full jurisdiction on our territories, despite any, alleged benefits that any other group would see from this project.
Chief Walks and Wasam Chief Namox, anything else that you'd like to add to this question? If not, we can move on to the next one.
Well, those who say that are usually not the ones that are on the land. They don't know how to be on the land. If we're on the land, we know what we're talking about. We know where things are at. We know all of these areas. And that's why we care. That's why we protect it. And it can be easily said that they're undermining our position because, one, they either are employed by these people, two, or they are paid off, one or the other. You got to be realistic about this stuff.
And also the fact you have to realize when they keep pushing this number of 20 First Nations on board, those are communities that are not along this pipeline route. When it comes to our territory, the reserve system themselves, they look after reserve, which is a very, very minute piece of our territory. Yes, there are families. Yes, there are relatives. Yes, there are house and clan members, but they have only the jurisdiction on a reserve. The territory is the house, the clan, the nation. We are the highest ranking chiefs. And the decision was made by our nation that no, this pipeline will not happen. And if they stick within their jurisdiction, which is created by Canada, they will jump on board because that's where the money is. but the very fact that we are the authority and jurisdiction with the power and authority of our houses and clans. That is why we're hereditary chiefs and we're not elected. Beside.
Thank you so much for all of you for answering that question. Another question that we have from folks, and this is the second question that we'll be addressing. The question is, I want to come to the Yinta and I have experience with blockades. Can you let us know a little bit more about what it looks like to come and support you directly on the land? And I'll open this one up to any of the speakers who'd like to answer this one first. So what does it look like to come and support on the Yinta?
Probably Sleydo.
Thanks. I think that people need to realize that, to be on the Yinta, we're following Wet'suwet'en law on the ground. We're following direction of our hereditary governance system and our laws that are ancient laws. It's also, like we've been talking about this whole time, it's a crisis zone. There are constant police harassment and surveillance. People need to be experienced in that, know how to conduct themselves and be able to follow leadership direction, Indigenous leadership's direction on the ground. And it's very useful for people to have basic level bush skills, because we do live out on the Yinta, and that's, where we're conducting ourselves and how we need to do that.
And I'll simply add to that we will remain peaceful. That violence comes to us. We don't instigate it. We don't accept it. We won't permit it, but come with a pure heart, because you're doing the right thing. Miss that.
I reiterate what Nemox has said. No violence and no intimidation to the other people that are around. And especially we don't condone any type of wrongdoing out there.
Thank you for responding to that question as well. And I hope for folks who are able to actually come up to the Yinta to go up to the land. The next question that we have, sorry, I'm just sifting through the questions right now, bear with me. So the next question that we have is, it's not clear to me what justification is used on behalf of the Trudeau government to use the RCMP against its own population. Why is Trudeau still unreachable from any tribunal accusation? So how can Justin Trudeau justify using the RCMP against their own populations? How is that possible? So I will open up that question as well to anyone from the panelists who would like to answer it.
If I could, on the first part there, you have to realize the history of Justin Trudeau. Let's think of his father. I remember the 1969 white paper. 1974, I wouldn't shake that prime minister's hand because of the 1969 white paper. Do you know that Justin Trudeau, when he was asked why he bought the TMX, he said that he bought it because it was the only pipeline for sale. And he said that with a smile, knowing the violence that would follow, because you cannot take Canada's money and spend it on something for another country. So that shows how little respect he has for our people and all Indigenous people in Canada itself. Our biggest word is wagus, respect, and he's not shown it to this country because he buys projects such as these, takes the public money, invests in it, and they're funding the violence. They're adding to climate change. When Canada is one of the only G7 countries to actually increase the pollution to this planet, and we're criminalized for standing up for protecting air, land, water, human rights, Indigenous rights, that is a prime minister I do not respect. I'm gonna say.
I just want to add, we're on an uphill battle on this one. It doesn't matter who's in power. It doesn't matter who's in charge. The Liberals, the PCs, NDP at the federal level, or on the provincial level. They all have the same mentality that they do not and will not acknowledge Wet'suwet'en title because of the fact that it changes the face of what will happen and how business is conducted. And they just simply cannot accept the idea that this is Wet'suwet'en land. This is the title that we're talking about, the true title. And when it comes on the table or when it's mentioned, yes, there's a flight or fight situation that happens. In their case, a flight happens. They avoid us. We've called out Trudeau. We've called out the NDP leader. We've called out the PC leader. We've called out the provincial leaders as well. But predominantly, we all had the same outcome. They're all in bed with industry. They're all in bed with the money that they took from industry. They got all paid off. And it's kind of like a hush-hush money for them. Plain and simple. So got to be realistic about this stuff. Outside.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for answering these questions. And thank you to the audience as well for sending all these questions over. Also, folks, just so we know, I'm going to pass it to Sleydo right after this, but just so folks know, please make sure that you go to the top of the page and sign up for the emails as well. We'll put that link back in the chat right now for folks to sign up for emails from Gidimt'en directly. And without further ado, I again thank you so much to our three speakers, and I'll pass it back to Sleydo to wrap us up and to give us the final words.
Say, the amount of pressure and stress that we feel every day, knowing that our people and our land are under threat, is made worse by the constant police presence. Police are showing up at my house unannounced and questioning us just for simply living our lives. My children are 2, 6, and 11 years old, and they should not have to bear this burden. We've done nothing to deserve this kind of treatment. We are simply living out our laws, which are older than so-called Canada itself. At the same time, I know we can win this. I believe in the thousands of people who have stood up for us, for all of our futures. I know that the actions of everyone, from the grassroots and Indigenous nations who stood up with us, to each individual person that's out there, have kept our beloved river, Wedzin Kwa, clean and pristine for the last several years. I'm energized by the beauty that I see in Wedzin Kwa every day, and grateful for how the land provides for me and my family and my community. CGL planned to drill under Wedzin Kwa by the end of 2020, and yet here we are 2 years later. They've slowly inched their way closer to the drilling, but they've been stopped, delayed, and prevented from destroying our river time and time again. The occupations at Coyote Camp stopped the drilling for months and resulted in severe police repression. And yet there was a Coyote Camp 2 just weeks later. We see you all out there, and we are inspired to keep going because we know that we're not alone. Together, nothing can stop us. Take to the streets, take direct action, and show the world that the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs will never stand down. Show them that you will never stand down, but that we will rise up and do the right thing for all of our futures. Follow us on social media and share updates from camp far and wide. Here are our accounts on this slide. Download the toolkit and start organizing. Spread the word, whether it's online, in real life, on the streets, at government offices. And finally, this one is really important. Make sure that you share whatever action it is that you're taking. Share it with me, share it with our amazing digital team so they can help spread the word even more by amplifying your action. So go to the email address. You can send all of your photos and videos, or tag Gidimt'en on Twitter, Yinta Access on Instagram, and RCMP off the Yinta on TikTok, or RCMP off Yinta on TikTok. Thank you so much for being with us and for standing with us. And we know that we can win this fight together. It's going to benefit everybody, all of our future generations, all of the future projects that don't have free and prior informed consent. This is a catalyst for how government and industry work into the future. Oh, it's Misai.
Thank you so much for that, Sleydo. Thank you so much for everyone who attended. We have over 800 people who attended this, and just very grateful for everyone who showed up. And thank you again to our speakers. We have a very short video right now that we're going to play, and I'll pass it to the tech team. Bear with us. I think we're having some tech difficulties. One moment. So this is just a quick video that shows footage of RCMP harassment and surveillance over the last few weeks.
What are you here for? Are you gonna talk to me?
I don't want to intrude on this birthday
You are
party.
intruding by being here.
You don't give me 6 feet, I'll arrest you for obstruction.
So why do you keep coming here every day invading my privacy?
You want to remove indigenous children from their lands. You come here to help build a pipeline on their territory to ensure their rivers that give them water is poisoned.
Are you writing that down, what I'm saying?
Let's go.
So thank you all for bearing with us through these tech difficulties. Again, we're very grateful to our 3 incredible speakers and Wet'suwet'en land defenders. Thank you to Sleydo, thank you to Chief Was, and thank you so much to Chief Namox. Thank you to the folks in the background who are doing tech, forever grateful for all of your work. And thank you so much to the participants who joined, who engaged by asking us questions. And we're super excited to see the pictures and the actions moving forward. And a reminder that solidarity is taking action and being consistent. So thank you all so much. And I hope you all have a good rest of your evening and a good rest of your day. Thank you.